Hey guys, how the hell are you? Today we're going to do an all-new unbiased gear review on this, the Agile Chiral Nirvana 82528 Headless model. Okay, so first of all, let's go over the specs of this instrument. We have a solid swamp ash body with a flame maple veneer. We have a bolted-on three-piece Wenge and maple neck with an ebony fingerboard with 24 stainless steel frets. We have Cepheus hardware here at the bridge and also the string clamps up at the top. We have a pair of Fishman Modern humbuckers, as well as a three-way toggle switch, master volume, and a master tone that has a push-pull for that extra voicing that the Fishmans have. This is a multi-scale design that goes from a 25.5-inch scale on the treble side to a 28 5/8 of an inch on the bass side. So first of all, real quick shout out to one of my subs, one of my viewers, Mr. Derek Anderson. Thank you so much for hooking me up with this. It has been a long time since an Agile, or for that matter, anything from Rondo Music has graced this channel. So I really appreciate you reaching out and offering me the opportunity to do a review of this instrument so that my viewers can get an idea how Agile is these days. So for those of you guys that are unaware, Agile is a brand from rondomusic.com that is one of the many brands that they actually build instruments under, actually. And a lot of times you see a lot of rather modern looking instruments being put out under that moniker. This is a rather new addition. This is a headless design that, to me, brings forth a lot of Skirvison and even Shen vibes. Remember that company? But, you know, that being said, it's not just about what it looks like. It's also about the overall build quality, and we definitely do have a few things to go over as far as this instrument is concerned. So, firstly, taking a look at the finish. The finish is rather nice. It's an extremely nice poly satin that is both on the body as well as on the back of the neck. On the back of the neck, it definitely feels a little bit more buffed out and a lot smoother, i.e. faster, for those awesome metal runs and shred runs that we might like to do on an instrument like this. Going over the body, though, something that is rather typical that you see a lot of with Agile instruments is there are little sort of burrs in the finish and little, I don't know, like for lack of a better description, it's almost like there's a piece of grit or something that got caught there during the initial paint process. And if you rub your hand along, you can feel it. Is it something that's going to outright affect playability? No, but it does bear mentioning in case you guys have never had an Agile and have not been exposed to that yet. But that is something that tends to be rather common with this company's instruments, so not to worry, it's kind of the norm. Taking a look at a few design choices here, I really like the fact that everything is nice and recessed on the back of the body. The cavity cover is recessed in. The screws that hold on the cavity cover are actually recessed into the cavity cover so that that is out of the way. The bolts for the neck are also recessed in, although admittedly I wish that was a little cleaner. There's like a little bit of a gap in between where the recession starts and where the actual bolt is. Not necessarily something that's a huge issue at all. It's just something that maybe when you're playing on stage, if we ever get to play on stage again, it might be something that could potentially get caught on a belt. But, you know, there again, it's one of those things that isn't really a major gripe. It just bears mentioning since we're reviewing an instrument. Especially since, you know, for those of you guys that are familiar with Agile, you know that Agile typically makes some rather inexpensive instruments typically. That being said, this one is on a little bit of the high side for them at about $900. Now, that puts it very much in the range of some of the nicer Schecter and ESP LTD stuff. So, you know, we need to talk about this with a little bit more emphasis on the features and on the quality wise, because this is meant to hang in that same sort of price bracket. Taking a look at the bridge and the string clamps, I really wanted to hate these. I took a look at them and I was like, man, that just looks really, really cheap. But very, very sturdy. This thing has excellent tuning stability. Surprisingly so. The nut clamps are in a good location. They're kind of out of the way. The screws do kind of jut out a little bit from the edge of the nut clamp, but whatever, it's doing its job. It's holding the string very firmly in place. The bridge hardware itself has a nice low profile. There are some screws back here which are kind of lifted up a little bit. But big deal, when you're palm muting, your hand is not even going to rest there, regardless of how massive this fan is. If anything, though, on the edges of the saddles where we've got the string resting on, that is a little bit high, a little bit tight there, and your hand will kind of notice that as you're doing the palm mutes. Staying with the bridge, there is one thing I definitely need to call out with this thing, and that is the sort of room around the high E tuning peg. Now, this is definitely something where it needs to have a little bit more material, a little bit more space right there around it, because as it stands right now, it is extremely cumbersome getting in there to tune that tuning peg. So does it matter so much? Nah, you're gonna basically be feeling that discomfort trying to get in there and tune up that string for maybe half a minute. But, you know, it's there again, it does bear mentioning because it's something that might throw the occasional player that picks up one of these instruments. A minute ago, I did mention how extreme the fan is, and that is definitely something that really needs to be talked about because when I posted this sucker on my Facebook and Instagram pages, instantly you guys were jumping on it like, holy shit, that fan is massive, that's going to be so uncomfortable, etc., etc. And honestly, it's kind of like any other multi-scale fan fret design. You just got to get used to it. For me, yeah, it took like a couple of minutes to get used to. About the same amount of time it took me to get used to playing an actual multi-scale the very first time I ever played one. About maybe 5 to 10 minutes. And then after that, it was just kind of like, oh, okay, this is just how this thing is meant to play. Yes, it's an extreme fan, but, you know, at just barely over 3 inches, it's kind of similar to what we would see on like some of the Ormsby GTR line, or for those of us that love our Dingwall basses, you know, that's a 3-inch fan as well, more so when you get into the extended range stuff. The only difference really here is that you've got a much shorter scale length by several inches, so one would think that it would actually be easier to maneuver around and play chords, but, you know, I understand that some people are going to have some issues with this. Myself personally, I actually really like the length of the fan because you've got that 25.5-inch scale on the treble side that is super comfy, super familiar for those of us that have played many shred sticks over the years. But for those guys like myself that love drop tuning, that love putting on thicker strings just because we really want the string tension, having that extra long bass side is honestly pretty awesome. It's definitely giving me the string tension I want. It's allowing the notes to ring out a little bit clearer on that low end. I really dig it personally. It's just something you got to get used to if you're going to pick up one of these things. Taking a look at the routes are kind of typical for what you see from Agile. They're not extremely like clean, but they're also not trashy either. Like, if anything, you see the occasional tool mark right here where it's obvious that that's where the bit actually entered when it was cutting out the route for this pickup. But that's kind of it. There's not really any burring of the edges that I'm seeing. It's somewhat crisp. Let's see, the dual truss rod is actually coming in really handy. And with that, let's talk about something that I noticed right away when I first took this thing out of the case and started inspecting it. Kind of taking a look at the neck itself, I was kind of amazed to actually see what looked like potentially a bit of warping along the neck itself. Down the one side, the treble side, completely straight as a fucking arrow. It was just kind of perfection, really good action on that side. Meanwhile, you go over to the bass side, there was a bit of a back bow to it, and the action was super high. Needless to say, with the permission of the instrument's owner, I took this to my local tech, Dr. John, just down the road. An extremely awesome tech who really knows his shit. And he and I took a look at it together. He gave a few quick turns of the Allen key up here and found that the truss rod is basically doing exactly what it's supposed to, so there's no issues as far as that goes. He gave it a few turns, tightened it up a little further. Next started to straighten out really nicely. So our conclusion was that honestly this thing wasn't really experiencing that much of an issue. It's definitely not something that will affect the owner's playability of this instrument, at least at this time. Definitely, though, there again, something that bears mentioning. It could potentially become a problem later on, could not become a problem later on, who knows. As far as the fretwork goes, which you guys know is probably my number one thing that just irks the shit out of me when it's done badly, this definitely could have been better, to be honest with you. It does have some spots along, especially the lower frets, where there is a little bit of buzzing present. So that would need to be leveled and given a good setup at some point. The actual fret edges themselves along the bass side are rather nice. You can definitely tell that they would probably be a little bit sharper if they were like right up to the edge of the fretboard. But whoever the tech was that originally set this thing up did a pretty good job rounding off just like the bottom edge of the fret edges here, as well as rounding off the fretboard edge. This is a very nicely rolled off fretboard edge for an instrument in this price bracket. Taking a look at the treble side though, that's where we have a few issues, if anything. From about right up here on up, we start to get a little teeny tiny bit of sharpness. Now, is it like 2017 Ibanez Premium fret sharpness? No, it is not nearly that bad. But is it something that does need to be mentioned, especially for those of you guys that are going to want to shred on these upper frets? Yes. I mean, even now, just doing that, it like becomes really super noticeable. Still has the rolled off fretboard edge along the treble side, but because of the sharpness of these upper frets, it's not really doing all that great of a job to impact the playability in a positive light. Besides that, a rather comfortable instrument to play on. I really like the bevel that's down here by the cutaway. It definitely makes it so that even though the higher frets are extremely accessible, it just takes any sort of doubt out of the equation. I think if anything, it would be nice if I had that bevel on the backside as well. It's something that I've gotten to really enjoy through some of my BC Riches that I've owned. Having that bevel on the back just makes it such a more comfortable instrument. It would just be nice to have that on the backside as well. That's wishful thinking though. If there's any last thing that I can call out as far as build quality wise though, taking a look at the neck joint. The neck joint itself is rather tight on the bass side. There is a bit of a noticeable gap on the treble side. It's not super big as far as the gap goes. It's not like my two front teeth gap big, but it is still noticeable all the same. Also, that seems to be the one place on this body where if anything can be called out as being a little bit rough as far as the routing goes, that would be it. So how does this thing sound? Pretty goddamn good. That is definitely one of the high points of this instrument. The Fishman Moderns are doing exactly what Fishman Moderns are supposed to fucking do. A punchy, like really punchy low end in there. Plenty of articulation. There's definitely a really good balance in the mid-range. A decent amount of low mids that are in there that are just kind of accentuated. The high mids pulled down ever so slightly just to give the treble a little bit more crispness. Sounding absolutely kick-ass in a high gain application. Sounds really goddamn good on that bridge pickup. That is a ceramic-based Fishman Modern, by the way. Neck is a Alnico-based one, and there again, kind of does what it's supposed to do. So overall, my final thought about this instrument, as I mentioned earlier, this is definitely a nice instrument. For the price point, I would like to see a little bit more of those quirks that we typically associate with rondo music instruments to be kind of ironed out. Stuff like the burrs underneath the finishing, the fact that the hardware is just kind of unrefined in terms of appearance. In terms of functionality, it's fucking great, but it would be nice if it looked a little crisper. You know, for the $900 price point of what this thing goes for without the case, I would like just a little bit more finer attention to detail as far as, you know, the little things here or there. I'm not expecting a goddamn perfect instrument at that price point, but I think when a lot of other builders, like a lot of made in Korea and made in Indonesia builders, are coming out with incredible instruments in that price point that don't have sharp fret edges, that don't have the little flex underneath the finish, that don't have like the little tool marks here or there or the little glue stain here or there. I think that something like this Agile needs to step it up a little bit. That said, was it a joy to play on? Fuck yes. Did it sound amazing? Oh yeah, it sounded great with those Fishman pickups. But, you know, it is what it is. So Arnold, what are you drinking today? I am so glad you asked. I am still on keto, so I am having a Gatorade Propel water. Working out well for me. I've lost about 17 pounds. So thank you guys so very much for tuning in. Like this video, subscribe to this channel. There is tons more metal guitar oriented content to come. And remember, take what you do seriously, but do not take yourself too seriously.